Hey everybody, and Tony here with my review of Bizet's Carmen with conductor Ben Glassberg, which I saw at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. This marks the 5th overall time I saw Ole Anders Thunberg's production of Bizet's Carmen at the Deutsche Oper Berlin because I wanted to see and hear Aigul Akhmetshina perform the title heroine. Aigul Akhmetshina is a mezzo-soprano I've been rather fascinated with as of late. She started out as a young artist program participant in the Royal Opera House, specifically the Jet Parker Young Artists program, and she definitely had a lot of promise during her tenure as a young artist at the Royal Opera House. And I've been quite curious to see how her career was going to progress, given that she had such an ambitious repertoire, ranging from Carmen to Elisabetta from Donizetti's Maria Stuarda, and even Charlotte from Massenet's Werther. So when I saw her live as Carmen, I was initially quite skeptical because I was not so sure if her voice was going to carry over the orchestra or if she had the proper technique to make Carmen come to life. And lo and behold, I was not really disappointed at all. In fact, Aigul Akhmetshina's voice was creamy, elegant, and it was quite pleasing to listen to. Granted, it could be a lot chestier, it could be a lot stronger and more powerful, let alone more incisive, but she was able to do a serviceable job as a vocalist. She did use her top notes to her advantage. Her middle was quite nice to listen to, and she did hit some of the low notes rather well, although I would have loved to have a lot more commitment to her chest tones. At least she was elegant on stage. At least she managed to carry herself well as a singing actress. And she did a good job in portraying Carmen with elegance, class, but she was a thoroughly elegant figure, both theatrically and vocally. I do argue that she does need to work a lot more in her chest tones because it says something when sopranos who sang Carmen, such as Emma Calvé, Emmy Destin, Rosa Poncelle, Marta Mödel, Annie Konecny, Helena Braun, and Suzanne Juyol had way more chest tones than Aigul Akhmetshina could ever produce, especially Marta Mödel, who sang both soprano and mezzo-soprano roles throughout her entire career before committing herself to singing mezzo and contralto roles throughout the 1960s. It does say a lot when someone like Frau Marta Mödel could be able to dig into those deep, dark, and rich chest tones, especially in the card aria En vain pour éviter, and do so with abandon. It also says something when Zwischenfach or Falcon singers such as Floritza Cristoforeanu, Giulietta Simeonato, Christa Ludwig, Shirley Verrett, Grace Bumbry, Isolde Eichlepp, and to some extent Gail Gilmore could be able to hit those chest tones with richness and rawness, and even hit those blazing top notes, especially where the likes of Shirley Verrett and even Grace Bumbry are concerned. And if you're talking real mezzos, you can never ever go wrong with the likes of Ebe Stignani, Elena Nicolai, Chloe Elmo, Irene Minghini Cataneo, Giuseppina Zinetti, Gianna Pederzini, Aurelia Dominguez, and my personal favorite, Elena Obraztsova, especially where both Dominguez and Obraztsova are concerned. all thanks to their cavernous chest tones. Those singers, whether they be dramatic sopranos or dramatic mezzos, are my favorite voices for Carmen. And speaking of chest tones, there were occasions in which Miss Akhmetshina's chest tones didn't sound full or rich enough, which affected the entirety of her vocal performance, let alone the most important facet of every opera singer, the core. And I'm talking about where all that meat and that beefiness lies and where all the projection is born from. For instance, in her card aria En vain pour éviter, specifically the line where she sings Repartira la mort, I really would have loved that passage to be a lot chestier, to be a lot darker, richer, and raw in pure emotional abandon. You had singers just like Oralia Dominguez, Floritza Cristoforeanu, Elena Obrazova, Giuseppina Zinetti, Gianna Pederzini, Gabriella Besansoni, and Marta Mödel pulling off those rich, dark chest tones that are absolutely needed for the card aria En vain pour éviter. Aigul Akhmetshina did kind of hold back in that particular moment, which is kind of a shame because that is the moment where Carmen is at her most dramatic. Despite all those vocal shortcomings, I still have to give credit to Aigul Akhmetshina for her creamy tone, especially how she was able to use it well and her elegance on stage and how she was able to carry herself quite well as a vocalist. If she continues to develop her core, if she continues to work on her chest tones and really make them as deep and rich and powerful as possible, she could be very well on her way to sing the grander roles like Amneris from Aida, Eboli from Don Carlo, Azucena from Trovatore, Brangäne from Tristan und Isolde, Venus from Tannhäuser, Ortrud from Lohengrin, Kundry from Parsifal, probably even Sieglinde from Valkyria, and maybe even Marie from Wozzeck if she continues to also develop her top notes, and who knows, maybe she might make for a fine Countess Geschwitz from Lulu if she continues to strengthen her technique, further develop her core, and do what she can to make sure that she sings a whole lot better than she did. There is a wonderful future for Miss Akhmetshina in the grander mezzo roles, especially where the likes of Amneris, Eboli, and even Marina Minashach from Boris Godunov and Marfa from Kovanshina are concerned. There is a voice that is in need of great polishing and way more depth and richness because she does have potential. She does have talent and elegance to carry herself well. All she needs to do is further develop her chest tones, further develop her core, and really use a lot more coordinated chest voice in everything she sings, whether they be from the bel canto operas or from the verismo operas or even from the French operas. Sky's the limit for her. I could even see her as Santuzza in Cavalleria Rusticana if she continues to develop her technique well. So I still have to give Aigul Akhmetshina credit where credit is due in terms of her elegance and her creamy tone and how she was able to carry herself well on stage. And here's hoping that she does not squander her talents and use that voice to its maximum potential. Maria Motoligina stole the show among the ladies and even among everybody as Micaela. Her gorgeous, big timbred, juicy, beautiful, full lyric soprano voice that has the potential to grow into a spinto soprano glowed absolute absolutely wonderfully. She was able to be at her A game, singing the heck out of Micaela with sufficient coordination in her voice, with sufficient beauty of tone, and of course, a hugely projected voice that can be able to sing over the orchestra and electrify the audience. That's what Mademoiselle Motoligina managed to accomplish tonight as Micaela. She was more than just good, she was excellent in the role and the type of voice that I would love to look for in sopranos singing Micaela. I'm talking about those big, juicy, full lyric sopranos that can border on spinto sopranos. She was definitely able to master that voice of hers as wonderfully as she did, and I salute her for all of her endeavors. She's quite up there with the likes of Gabriella Tucci, Rossana Carteri, Mirella Freni, Maria Chiara, Andrea Guillot, Lotte Lehmann, and Wanda Axel Clemens as my personal favorite sopranos for Micaela. And for that, Maria Motoligina deserves all the praise I could give her thanks to her sterling technique. And here's also hoping that she continues to grow from strength to strength as a soprano, because I have seen her grow from when I first saw her as Amelia Grimaldi / Maria Boccanegra from Verdi Simon Boccanegra, and here she was at her A game, continuing to grow, glow, and blossom as a beautiful and electrifying full lyric soprano who does also have the potential to grow into a spinto soprano. Ariana Manganello was a silky toned, creamy toned, and really gorgeous Mercedes who was able to take advantage of that silky lyric mezzo voice of hers to the greatest advantage, and also play up the elegance factor of Mercedes and also have a lot of fun with this role. And Elisa Verzier was a silvery toned, sparkling, and agile Frasquita, using her light lyric soprano voice to bring in a lot of charm, girlishness, and beauty to this role. And I hope that Elisa Verzier continues to grow from strength to strength, because she is a fine light lyric soprano who does have the potential to sing a lot of the wonderful roles of the Italian and French repertoire, especially where the likes of Sophie from Werther and even Hélène from Lakmé are concerned. The possibilities for Miss Elisa Verzier are endless. Matthew Newlin was a good vocalist as Don José. He was able to maintain his rock-solid technique as a lyric tenor. He was still able to sing quite well in terms of the lyrical passages. However, I have a huge problem with Matthew Newlin taking on Don José. He was overparted, underpowered, undervoiced, and Don José was just way too heavy for Matthew Newlin. It's no secret that I love Matthew Newlin's voice. He is a fine lyric tenor. I love that sweet as honey tone that he was able to produce, whether he sings roles like Tamino or Belmonte, or even character parts like Borsa from Rigoletto or Arturo Buckloff from Lucia de Lammermoor. He is at his best when he sings all of these elegant lyric tenor roles, and he does so with vocal beauty and with sufficient charm. Is he as great as, let's say, Beniamino Gigli or Giuseppe Di Stefano or even Gianni Raimondi? Not by a long shot. But Matthew Newlin is and will always be a fine and precise musician. Now, going to my critique about him as Don José, I say that the role is just too heavy, too big, and just too much for him, because there were occasions in which he was trying to blow out his naturally beautiful lyric tenor voice just to produce loud sounds. And when he tries to hit the chest tones, they don't really sound that appealing, especially when he threatens Aigul Akhmetshina's Carmen in the second half of the opera. They don't really sound that nice, and sometimes they sound pretty hollow to listen to. And I just get so concerned for him because Matthew Newland's voice, as I stated before, and will state again, is a beautiful, handsomely toned, and lovely lyric tenor voice. And to see him try to push his natural lyric tenor voice to a role that is usually designated for a spinto / dramatic tenor, almost akin to his successor Calaf from Turandot, or even that of Cavaradossi from Tosca, is just him asking for trouble. Just give me real spinto / dramatic tenor voices singing Don José, such as Helge Roswenge, Enrico Caruso, Giovanni Martinelli, Giacomo Lauri Volpi, Franco Corelli, who, mind you, is my number one favorite tenor for Don José, next to Helge Roswenge, who is also, funnily enough, my number one favorite Don José, at least on the German side. And if we're looking for more French-style singers, I can't go wrong with the likes of Tony Ponce, Roy Jobin, René Maison, and even the Australian-born Albert Lance. And if I want more roughness and virility, I could never go wrong with Mario del Monaco. But when it comes to tenors with the spadavoce, or those sword-like tenors that can cut through the orchestra and have these sizable voices, almost akin to a battle axe, just swinging at every opponent and cutting each of the opponent's heads, I could never go wrong with Giacomo Lauri Volpi, or even Franco Corelli, or even Helge Roswenge as Don José. Those are my favorite tenors for Don José because they have those type of voices. However, when it comes to Matthew Newland as Don José, it just seems like he is asking for trouble by pushing his natural lyric voice to places where he should never have pushed them, and even just do so in ways in which I fear for his vocal safety, I fear for his vocal health, and I fear for what's going to happen if he continues going down that path. Here's my advice for Matthew Newland. Yes, he did a good job in this role. You managed to do everything you can to make the role your own. You were sufficiently charismatic and charming, and you brought in some surprising amount of virility to make Don José your own. But please, 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 stick to roles like Tamino, Belmonte, Don Ottavio, Arbace from Idomeneo, Ferrando from Così fan tutte, Gérald from L'Acme, both Hylas and Iopus from Lutoyon, Werther from Massenet's Werther, Prince Leopold from Alvis la Juive, Bois-Rosé from Meyerbeer's Les Huguenots, Rimbaud from Meyerbeer's Robert le Diable, Froh from Wagner's Das Rheingold, David from Wagner's Die Meistersinger von Nürnberg, The Young Sailor from Wagner's Tristan und Isolde, and many other great roles for a lyric tenor. Please just leave Don José to the big boys, i.e. the spinto tenors / dramatic tenors, basically any of the tenors with spadavoce, or those sword-like voices that can cut over the orchestra. Please, please, please save your voice and save whatever vocal beauty you still had, because you still have a lot of wonderful gifts as a fine lyric tenor, and I do not want to see or hear them squandered. So that's all I have to say for Matthew Newland as Don José. He was vocally and theatrically serviceable, But if he continues to push his voice with roles like Don José and many other taxing roles, he's just going to ask for trouble, and his voice is just going to end up fading away if he continues to pursue those heavier roles. He should stick to the lyric tenor roles and leave Don José to the big boys. Even though he still has his rock solid technique at hand, it's still not enough to convince me that this is a tenor suitable for Don José. He was still decent in the role. It's just that I expect a lot more heft. I expect a lot more incisiveness. And I expect a lot more blood and guts for Don José. Matthew Newland should just lift what he should lift and just stick to the lyric tenor repertoire for good and for all. Artur Garbas has a creamy and pleasantly full tone as Don Cahill, who is able to inject him with charm and sufficient virility. And even though I do prefer a tenor singing Don Cahill, such as Kurt Equilutz or even David Cangelosi, I still have to say that Artur Garbas was a fine musician from beginning to end. Kieran Carell managed to make fine use of his light character tenor voice to bring the role of Remandado to life, and even though I still find his nasality rather annoying, and he could manage to take a few tips and tricks from real tenors like Milen Paunov and even Murray Dickey, he could still manage to develop well as a young tenor because he does have a lot of talent, he does have a lot of charm, and he just needs to further develop his technique and get rid of that nasality for good and for all. I was rather excited to see Byung-gil Kim take on Escamillo because I have seen this bass baritone grow from strength to strength with all the roles that he has been singing these days. Yes, listening to him a lot more critically, he still has the problem with throatiness, and he still has that vocal crudeness that does make him a little bit monodimensional as a singer. But other than that, he still had that darkness that I love in any singer tackling Escamillo. And of course, what more can you expect from someone as dashing, dapper, virile, and handsome as Byung-gil Kim? He was able to move quite elegantly, yet masculinely, like a panther on the prowl on stage as Escamillo. He was able to win me over theatrically as the torero, and win my heart he did. He was absolutely fine in terms of his stage presence, being all commanding and strong and absolutely towering, but his vocal resources do need a lot more improvement. The throatiness is still there, the crudeness is still there, and he can certainly take a lot of tips and tricks from what to do with proper squillo singing. And I could definitely suggest the following bass baritones and baritones, including Ferdinand Franz, Gustav Neudlinger, Robert Merrill, Lawrence Tibbett, Gian Giacomo Guelfi, Cornell McNeil, Ernest Blanc, Julien Giovanetti, and another personal favorite of mine, Franz Kras, in terms of what it takes to do proper squillo singing that can carry a voice over an orchestra. Despite Byung-gil Kim's continuous problems with throatiness, and I seriously hope that he tackles that problem head on and really retrain his voice to sing with as much squillo, with as much proper depth, darkness, richness, and strength as possible, just so that it could sing over the orchestra. I could still root for him as an involving, charismatic, virile, and charmingly handsome stage actor as Escamillo. He continues to show potential, and I do not want to see his star fade anytime soon. There is a wonderful future for Byung-gil Kim in roles such as Mephistopheles, Don Giovanni, and Filippo il Secondo. And if he continues to develop his squillo a lot more, if he continues to develop his depth more properly, then he will definitely tackle those basso cantante parts head on and all guns blazing. Christian Simmons was solid all throughout as Zuniga, and he does have that darkness and roundness that I love in many a basso singing Zuniga, but his throatiness could not be overlooked. And I'm sure that he is still someone in the cusp of a fine international career, so he should really work on eliminating the throatiness in his voice and use proper squillo singing. And the bases that I would recommend for him in terms of proper squillo singing are the likes of Jerome Hines, Cesare Siepi, Nikolai Gyaurov, and Bonaldo Giaiotti, and even Giorgio Tozzi and Ezio Flagello, although they didn't really sing the role of Zuniga. In fact, the basses who sang Zuniga are Samuel Ramey, Ara Barbarian, and Anton Diakov. Those are basses who sang Zuniga that Christian Simmons should definitely look up to in terms of proper big and proper squillo singing. There's a nice future for Mr. Simmons in terms of roles such as Filippo II and Sparfucile if he continues to develop his technique as best as he can. Nevertheless, despite the issues that I've had with his throatiness, he was still an involved stage actor, and he was able to give the goods as Zuniga, a part that is otherwise really thankless, all thanks to his masculine charm and how he was able to bring in a lot of dimension to this role. Dean Murphy was a handsome and dashing Morales, although he could continue to develop his ability to sing squillo a lot more, but he was still in fine form as a baritone singing this role, although my personal favorite Morales in the form of Robert Kearns cannot be overlooked. Nevertheless, Dean Murphy was fine and dandy as Morales, and I'm sure that he will continue to grow in strength and in virility as a fine baritone. So overall, the singers were solid all throughout. The one singer among the women singers and probably everybody who stole the show was none other than Maria Motoligina as Micaela. She sang with pure abandon and beauty, and for that, she received high marks from me, and she was vocally the best out of everybody tonight, especially where the main singers are concerned. Yes, Aigul Akhmetshina was elegant as Carmen. Yes, Matthew Newlin gave everything he got as Don Jose. Yes, Byung-gil Kim was handsomely virile in terms of his stage presence as Escamillo. But I cannot overlook the fact that Aigul Akhmetshina could be a lot chestier, could be a lot richer, rounder, and way more incisive with her voice so that she can take on the more challenging mezzo roles in the future. I could never deny the skepticism and fear I had for Matthew Newlin in terms of how he was pushing his naturally beautiful and naturally sweet lyric tenor voice to the extremes as Don Jose, and I hope that he just goes back to lifting weights that he can lift, if you know what I mean, and just leave Don Jose for the natural spinto tenors slash dramatic tenors and stick with roles like Tamino, Gerald, or even Peleas, just to save his voice from any wreckage. As for Byung-gil Kim, I will never deny that yes, he continues to be quite the charismatic gentleman on stage, but he seriously needs to get rid of his throatiness so that he can sing a lot freely and a lot more handsomely. At least Artur Garbas, Kieran Carell, Ariana Manganello, and Elisa Vertier were able to sing really well, and especially having both Manganello and Vertier stand tall and proud as Mercedes and Frasquita respectively, all thanks to their beautiful voices. And even though there is a bit of reservation I had for Christian Simmons and Dean Murphy respectively as Zuniga and Morales, they were still able to make the best out of their roles. Regardless, out of all the singers, Maria Motoligina stole the show, and even though there were some qualities of certain singers that need a lot more improvement, I'm very confident that they can be able to take it by the reins and go all guns blazing in terms of properly improving themselves. The conducting done by Ben Glassberg was rapid, and I mean rapid, especially in the overture, as it was one of the fastest interpretations of the overture that I have ever heard. He managed to just keep my blood pumping in the fast segments, and there were times that he could have used a little bit of nuance in the lusher segments, and there were many occasions in which he let the brass play as loudly as possible, which tended to cause an imbalance in terms of how Bizet's music was going to sound like. Yes, there were occasions in which he should have shown a lot more balance and a lot more nuance when conducting. At least I can give him credit where credit is due in terms of the fast and really high octane moments which kept my blood pumping and made me thoroughly awake throughout the evening. And what more can you expect from the chorus and orchestra of the Deutsche Oper Berlin? They were reliable as always, and they were able to strengthen the performance all the way through. So overall, Aigul Akhmetshina as Carmen managed to make a good first impression on me. It wasn't necessarily the best first impression, not the worst either. It was serviceable. She was able to be strong enough on her own as a performer. She started out really strong, especially in her opening aria, L'amour est un oiseau rebelle, and she was able to be an elegant singing actress all the way through. Maria Motoligina was probably the strongest performer of the evening as Micaela, as she was able to take advantage of her naturally beautiful and absolutely nuanced and gorgeous full lyric soprano voice to make the best out of Micaela. Matthew Newland, although overparted as Don Jose, and although he had the tendency to try to let his voice out just to try to sound big, he was still charismatic enough in the role. And Byung-gil Kim, despite his vocal flaws of being throaty and swallowed and quite crude in his vocal production, he was still a virile and fine stage actor who was able to command a fine stage presence all the way through. And for those of you who caught this production of Bizet's Carmen at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, what did you think of it? Did you enjoy Aigul Akhmetshina's performance as Carmen? Did you find some things that you liked about her performance? Or did you feel that it was not really to your liking? Did you also feel that Maria Motoligina stole the show from everybody's feet as Micaela? Or did you feel like the singing was not really to your liking? Please comment below and let me know. Well, that's it for my review of Bizet's Carmen at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, starring Aigul Akhmetshina as Carmen. Tune in next time for my review of Verdi's Aida back at the Staatsoper unter den Linden, starring Ketevan Kemoklitze as Amneris. So until then, good night, everybody.